Hello friends, this is Charles. I'm a real fan of little alcohol stoves because they're so compact and the fuel is clean burning. But the problem is when you run out of alcohol, they're not much good. And every once in a while, you might be out in the bush and you'd like to have a little bit more of an open type fire. So I've been thinking about biomass burners. And there are a number of them on the market. I'm not very fond of the sort of circular ones about the size of a paint can because they're just a bit too big and bulky to be lugging around. But I really liked the firebox just because it was square and comes apart and so on. But being cheap, I didn't feel like buying one. So I thought I'd see what I could make myself. And the firebox is also just a little bit larger than I would like. So I've made a little wood burner stove, a biomass burner. And I made it using these 4-inch junction box covers, square, that you can buy in hardware stores or building supply stores. I got these here in Victoria at Home Depot, and they cost $1 a piece. So if you want to do just exactly what I did, you would need 6 of these. I also got some split ring from the split rings from the fishing department, and I don't know, they're what, about not ½ an inch, but something, maybe 3/8 of an inch in diameter. It says number 8, stainless split rings number 8. The other thing you're going to need is some wire. You could use coat hanger wire like this. I actually used some old berry wire I had left over from when I moved off the farm. So the stove that I made weighs about 22, 24 ounces, something like that. A little, less than 2 pounds, is £1.5 pounds, something like that. It folds up quite small. I'll show it to you before I burn it because I want you to be able to see everything pretty clearly. This is a little denim bag I just sewed up to keep it in. And you can see everything is wrapped up in this bag. And I'll take it out, all the bits and pieces, and show you how it goes together. Something snagging in here. Oh, I don't know what that is. It's the pot support that I made. Okay. Let's get it out of the bag. Okay. New bag, threads. Alright. So there are 2 of these a little bit longer pieces of wire that are bent over at the ends, and then there's 3 of these shorter pieces, and I'll explain those in a minute. There's the pot stands. There's a little grill. There's the floor of the firebox. And here is the firebox itself. It just folds up like this. Makes a little box like that. Stands on its own. Now, what I've done is I've just drilled holes that are about twice the, just about the diameter of those split rings, so that then you can join all the pieces together with split rings. And each one of these is cut out from one of these plates. They're all exactly the same. So my suggestion would be to clamp 4 of them together, do your layout on one of these, and then you can just do everything else you need to do. All it's done is there's some drilling that's done and a little bit of hacksaw work, but not much. So what happens is that you have these holes in the corners, and I wanted to have a gap at the bottom so that you could get good airflow up from the bottom. And also with the legs, standing. It's a sort of loose construction, I wouldn't say sloppy, but what that means is that if one end gets stood up on an uneven surface or something, it's not going to matter. The stove will still stand, you know, and be reasonably solid. Okay, so the stove just unfolds once it's taken out of the bag. And I've cut some little slots here just by drilling some 1/8 inch holes and taking a chainsaw file and opening it up into a slot. And those slots are to hold these long pieces. And these long pieces are just a little bit longer than what would be required to go across one of these plates. And their purpose is to hold the grill down at the bottom. That is, and you just put them in like that. And the actual bottom of the firebox is again one of these plates. I just laid it out on 1/2 inch squares, drilled it out. I think these are now 5/8 or something like that holes. A little bit bigger than a 1/4. I just wanted to be sure there's plenty of draft coming through. That just rests in there on those wires, and presto, that's the stove. You're going to want some sort of pot support. So I took one of the plates, my 6th plate. I'll show you how this fits. And what I did is I just cut that plate on a diagonal and then cut the tips of it off. And I got 2 of these pieces. And because it's cut on a diagonal, it's long enough that it will reach where I need it to reach. Now, you could actually make it so that it would reach right across, but by the time you put a slot in here, it's going to be pretty close down onto the box. So instead, I cut it so that these would reach on the diagonal, and because it's not as long as going all the way across, you get, you know, like a good inch or so up above the firebox so that you get better airflow. So I've cut these 2, and you just have to make these slots wide enough that they will fit on a diagonal. And because of the looseness of the fit, it doesn't really matter a whole lot where you put them. Now this pot stand is perfectly adequate for taking, you know, a good sized pipe. Or, you know, a big old camping bowl. There's another. This is a cheapo stainless steel thing I bought at $4, I think, but it's stainless steel, got a nice wide bottom on it. But some people like to use, you know, small size tin cans, and boy, I tell you, that's just not going to work well. So all I did is I cut some grooves across here, and I used some more of that wire, and the grooves will just allow the wire to sit down flush with the top of the pot stand. And so if you're going to use a little bitty pot or a narrow mug or something like that, then you can just put these pieces of wire in there. And now, you know, your soup can, if you make a pot out of a soup can, your soup can pot will fit on there, no problem at all. It's not going to come off. And because these are down there, it will still take a standard size pipe. With this particular sort of pot stand on here, you still have room to put more wood into the sides. Even, you know, if the pot's on there, you can just move it down to one end and put more wood in. It doesn't feed from the bottom at all. Alrighty. Now it also occurs to me that one of the things that some of these little biomass burners like to use is a grill for grilling meat of some kind. And I thought, well, you know, that might not be such a bad idea. So I made a grill. And here's my grill. It's stainless steel, and it just fits across the top of the stove like that. And where did this come from? Well, I'll show you a picture in a minute, but it comes from a barbecue spatula. I just went down to the second-hand store and I bought one of these spatulas that made for a barbecue, and I cut the handle off of it and just bent the ends up. Another thing you might try is a great big industrial potato masher. Might also make a standard, I mean a dandy little grill. I mean something like that. If you just cut it and bent it so that it would sit on top, would also work. So you could use this for grilling hot dogs or a hamburger or something. I mean you wouldn't put a 24-ounce T-bone steak or something like that on here. It'd be flopping all over anyway, but grill a small chunk of meat with no problem. So that's the stove, that's the components, and it took nothing but $1 for a big barbecue spatula at the second-hand store. 6 of these little plates, and so they were about $1 a piece here, probably cheaper where you are. So that would be $6, and then some coat hanger wire, which you probably got lying around. And the split rings that I bought at the fishing store cost me $1. And you only need 6 of them because you got one side that's not connected. So then you can take it all apart once it's cool. Take the bits and pieces apart. And then the whole thing just folds up quite flat. And your 2 pieces for the pot stand, the wire, presto, and it all fits in that nice little bag. Okay, well, I will not give you precise measurements on anything. You've seen how it goes. You may want more or fewer or bigger vent holes in the side. I don't know. It depends on you and your experience and how they work. I'll take it outside and fire the thing up and let you see how it actually burns. But I wanted to show you what it looks like before it got completely dirty. I will say this, this is fairly heavy, probably about, I don't know, 1/16, maybe 1/32 inch thick steel. It's not stainless, these plates aren't, and they are galvanized, so they're zinc coated. So if you're worried about inhaling zinc fumes, just don't stand around and breathe the smoke coming off of it. And after you've burned it a couple of times, that will cease to be a problem because the zinc will come off. That does mean that after it's been fired a few times, these will have a tendency to rust, so it's going to require a little bit of care on your part. Be sure that it's dry before you put it away, and maybe you want to spray it with a little bit of WD-40 before you store it for good and all. Okay, so that's the little stove. Next thing I'll do is I will do the set it on fire and outside, and we'll do a little burn test with it. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Well, I just started to do the burn test, and of course the battery died on the camera, so I will have to redo it. A couple of things I forgot to mention, however, I thought I would add. One is that, the stove will burn any kind of fuel you want. That's, wood, dried animal dung, charcoal. You can also put an alcohol stove in there if you'd rather use an alcohol stove. I should also point out that the bottom grill is in fact adjustable, and when I started doing that I found out something sort of interesting about the way the stove is used. I cut these slots so that these wires could fit in the slots, and they're too big to go through the go straight through the 1/4 inch vent holes. But if you want to raise the height of that bottom grill, so you want to use fuel tabs or something like that, if you put the little bent wires to one side, it won't go straight through here, but if you cant the stove quite a bit, then it will go through. So because the construction of the stove is a bit loose, you can always put them through. And what that means is that, in fact, instead of cutting slots here at the bottom for those wires, I could have just drilled 1/4-inch holes and slewed the stove a little bit to the side to insert them. So there you could put fuel tabs in there, raising the height of that bottom grill. Well, I will do that burn test for you. I'll also include the dimensions of the stove as I have made it, that is where all of the holes are drilled. Really there's nothing to it. It requires a little bit of drilling and some hacksaw work to cut that out, and of course a bit of hacksaw work to make the pot stand. Alrighty, well, I will talk to you again in a few minutes.